a Boston conservative in the cradle of liberty. You'll want to listen when Chuck Morse speaks on the Information Radio Network.
And we are back, hour number 2 of Chuck Morse Speaks, Monday through Friday, 10 till noon, Eastern Standard Time, here at the Information Radio Network. You're welcome to join the program, 1-800-773-8255, 1-800-773-8255. My guest this segment is Mark Hayden. He is with Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Chuck, thank you so much for having me.
Mark, I'm concerned about the death penalty, even though I'm pro-death penalty, for one reason and one reason only, and that is because there is this horrendous possibility that an innocent person could be put to death. What is the thesis of your organization, and is this an issue that you address?
Well, absolutely. Conservatives concerned about the death penalty is a national network of conservatives and libertarians who believe the death penalty is completely inconsistent with our philosophies. And for me personally, when I came out against the death penalty, I gave it what I call the conservative litmus test. I asked myself, is it pro-life? And the answer is no. It runs a real risk of killing innocent people, which you just talked about. And some of my friends have said it's hard to be pro-life and support a program that might do that. It's also much more expensive than life without parole, so it's not fiscally conservative. And to me personally, it's not limited government. It's not representative of a limited government because it gives the government the power to kill U.S. citizens, and we should all be a little concerned about that.
Well, my concern, again, is whether or not we can determine absolutely that a person is guilty of the crime, of a capital crime. I think that at least my conventional wisdom holds that that can be done if there's, with advances in DNA evidence and with very high standards of proof put in place, at least 2 witnesses to a crime and other standards. I would think that we could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that a person was guilty of a capital crime. And if that can be done, I have no problem with the death penalty. It's just that I'm concerned about the the level of proof in place.
Absolutely, and you echo a concern that many conservatives have, as well as liberals and libertarians. We can't allow innocent lives to be taken. And you talk about DNA. DNA is actually only available in 5 to 10% of all criminal cases, and it's not quite like we see on CSI. A lot of these cases just don't have the forensic evidence, and we're seeing a lot of forensic evidence that has been used to sentence people and prove their, quote, guilt. Turned out to be bunk science. Recently, hair analysis has been thrown out of court because over 20 people were sentenced to death based on hair analysis that turned out to not be scientific. So a lot of this evidence that we rely on turns out to be unreliable in the end.
Well, but yet there are cases that are pretty cut and dried. We have a case going on right now here in Boston where this guy detonated bombs at the Boston Marathon, and was seen on video doing so. There's footage of him carrying the backpack, and then there's footage, and the backpack was where the bomb was. There's proof of that. There's an enormous amount of evidence that he dropped a backpack with bombs and killed 3 people and maimed very seriously many, many dozens of other people. I would think that in a case like that, the evidence, if he's convicted, he should absolutely be put to death.
And you make a good point. There are many cases that it seems to be irrefutable evidence, but it's very rare that you have that. And even with the case of the Boston bomber, what he did was tragic and horrific. But with that comes automatic appeals processes, which will still make it far more expensive than life without parole. And government makes mistakes. We all know that, and government is just a multiplication of people. So there is that fallibility that's still there, and there's many other problems when it comes to terrorist activity and executing them as well. Many of them are Islamic extremists, which it actually gives them martyrdom, which is what they're seeking. So you're actually helping them reach their goal, which could be problematic. And once you do execute someone who's active in terrorism, you run the risk of no longer having that person as a source of intelligence.
You know, look, as a taxpayer, I support and I'm willing to pay for the process to make sure that due process is undertaken if someone is guilty of the crimes, the terrible crimes that occurred in Boston. That I want that person executed. I think that is justice. I just, you know, and I think it's worth it financially to because I think it is a deterrent, and that it is, I would argue, a moral issue. You know, if someone commits such a heinous crime against other people, then it's not the government that's executing them in a sense. In a sense, they've executed themselves by violating the most fundamental laws of nature, and the government is just carrying it out. So, you know, I think from a moral standpoint, we have to execute people like that. You know, it's the only question I have is whether or not they did it. That's my main concern.
Sure, and I don't think you and I are actually that far apart. I can support the death penalty in theory or biblical death penalty, but our government just does not operate in a vacuum like that. We don't operate a biblical death penalty, and we are a very fallible government. And I think we have a lot of the same concerns. We're not that far apart. And you talked about using the death penalty for the most heinous crimes, but you see people like Jeffrey Dahmer and Charles Manson, they're not executed. But people like Carlos or Troy Davis, who were probably innocent, were executed. And there's no fairness in that.
Well, look, I agree with you, and I'm not calling for a biblical, execution here. I'm calling for American civil execution based upon, I suppose, biblical principles or based upon the laws of nations, in that a national sovereign nation does reserve the right to conduct a death penalty. The question is whether or not they're doing it under very high standards and very carefully. So my argument is that if we do it right in terms of really ensuring that the accused is guilty of a crime that we do deem to be a capital crime, then it's an appropriate measure. Now, obviously, in a country like communist China, you have people being put to death for political crimes. That runs completely against the American system. You know, we don't execute people or even punish people for their political opinions. But if someone is involved in such a violation of a literal actionable violation of the fabric of our society, then that is the appropriate punishment for them. Again, it just comes down to me to be a matter of whether or not it's provable. Somebody like Charles Manson and Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, if there was enough proof to indicate that they had been involved in or had ordered these terrible crimes, then I do think they should have been executed. It was a waste of time to keep them around. It actually would have been a favor to them to execute them, because it's the only way they're going to get any kind of atonement in this lifetime for the terrible crimes they committed.
You know, you talk about being sure that we have the right person, and I keep going back to it, and I believe you completely understand. There are so few clear-cut cases, and we've seen in the past that some of these clear-cut cases where it was overwhelmingly obvious that it was that person that was the perpetrator, but in the end we found out that the evidence just was not scientific. There was unreliable eyewitness testimony. And many of these people, I mean, over 140 people have been wrongfully convicted and released, and many others have been executed when there were serious questions regarding their verdict. And that's a problem that we're seeing over and over again. And we see different states. Don't get me wrong, I think the judicial system has the best of intentions. They get it wrong so often. And legislatively, they keep implementing new changes and fixes to try to make the death penalty work. But they're finding, as 18 states have already repealed the death penalty, finding that these fixes do not fix the actual problem. You still run a real risk of killing innocent people, and that should be offensive to everybody.
Well, look, we have a case in Massachusetts right now as I speak. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bulger case, but Whitey Bulger is being sentenced today at the federal court in Boston, and in the course of his trial, he's being accused of 20 murders. In the course of his trial, there was testimony brought against him by this guy, John Materano, also a local mobster, who has admitted to 20 murders, but who was out. He's walking around because he was, serving as a government witness, and he got immunity, and he fingered a lot of other people. I mean, in my way of thinking, that's the problem. I mean, here we have somebody who should be executed, probably should have been executed a long time ago, and he was able to get away with it because of the system that we have. I mean, he was allowed to, do favors for the government, and in exchange, he's walking around.
And you make a great point. The system's broken, and it's not working for everyone, and that's something that we should bring everybody together to try to talk about, because we're trying to get it to work, but you're seeing that a lot of people that perhaps are the worst of the worst are not getting the worst penalty, while others who may be innocent are being forced to be put to death. And that's just something we can't permit.
Well, the reason I bring this up also, Mark, is because I dispute your contention that there aren't clear-cut cases where someone is involved with murder, premeditated first-degree murder, which is definitely the case with Martirano and Bulger. He's been convicted of it already, and there's in the mountains of evidence of it, and that these people ought to be put to death. We're not talking here about something that has reasonable doubt or just witnesses. I mean, we're talking about cases that are clear-cut. And there are many of those, and these people are not being put to death. They're being kept around, like Charles Manson. He's lived his entire life in prison, like Sirhan, who murdered Senator Robert Kennedy. He's in prison still. And it's not even a matter of whether they did it. I mean, I would think that we're wasting, they should have been executed a long time ago.
Yeah, and this is talking more, I think, about theory versus reality here, because there are some cases, I will agree with you, there are many cases that have mountains of evidence, but we've found that oftentimes that mountain of evidence turns out to be false. And it's a rarity to have these multiple cases like that, because we're often wrong. This evidence is hard to rely upon. And if there's any possible doubt that we could be wrong, and we're men, we are fallible, we should take a step back and at least say life without parole. That's what I would love to see, life without parole, where the offender works to pay restitution to the victim's family members. In my personal view, that is a better form of justice, and it protects innocence from being possibly wrongfully executed.
Well, look, again, you and I think, are on the same page, and we agree with regard to people wrongfully accused and having a very, very high standard of evidence, and that there are cases, very celebrated cases, where someone is accused of a crime and then they turn out to be innocent. But I'm talking about cases where, the people are guilty and the evidence is irrefutable and they're walking around. I mean, we could take a look at Bill Ayers. He's a tenured professor now at the University of Illinois, one of the mentors of Barack Obama, one of the honored citizens of Chicago. He's admitted to have been involved in the bombing of a building where somebody died. And he's doing it because he knows he won't be dealing with the consequences. Anyway, we're going to take a commercial break here. Conservatives concerned about...
Granite Law is a law firm with partners in each state we do business. Our initial consultation is free, but there will be a cost to retain the firm.
Attention homeowners. The Obama administration is pressuring lenders to do more to prevent foreclosure with its Home Affordability and Stability Plan. If you own a home and you're having trouble making your payments or facing foreclosure, you need to call Granite Law's Mortgage Helpline today at 800-538-6780. A loan modification program can stop foreclosure proceedings, forgive late payments and penalties, take your adjustable rate mortgage to a fixed rate, and even reduce your mortgage payment to as low as 2%.
I seriously started to believe that we might end up on the street with our two kids. So we called Granite Law, and they helped us get our past due payments forgiven. And we got a lower interest rate. And now we have a payment we can afford.
If you're having trouble making your mortgage payment, you need to call 800-538-6780 today. Again, that's 800-538-6780. You don't need equity or good credit. You just need to call 800-538-6780.
PaidAtHome.com is the only work-from-home business I endorse, the only one. If you want to earn extra money from your kitchen table from a few hundred a month to several thousand, PaidAtHome.com is how Jay Young listeners do it. It's easier than you ever imagined. I trust these folks, and they need Jay Young listeners. Here's what listeners are saying. Lisa writes, tell your listeners this business works. After layoffs, we found PaidAtHome.com. In our first 6 weeks, we made $1,700 part-time. Now we're earning over $100,000, and we've both quit our jobs. Nancy and Ricky write, my husband was working 70 hours a week at a factory, and we were way in debt. I heard you talk about PaidAtHome.com. In our first month, we made $1,500 part-time. A short time later, we earned over $5,000 a month, and now we're well over six figures. PaidAtHome.com was awarded the prestigious American Business Award. This is your chance to work from home and earn a lot of money and respect. PaidAtHome.com wants Jay Young listeners, so they're giving away $1,000 to a lucky listener just for checking them out. Visit PaidAtHome.com. PaidAtHome.com. PaidAtHome.com.
Policies issued by American General Life Insurance Company, Houston, Texas. Not available in all states. For details, visit AIGdirect.com.
So I knew it was important to have life insurance to protect our family, but I was putting it off. But then yesterday, a girlfriend of mine asked me, point blank, what would happen if you lost your husband? How would you pay the bills, the mortgage, the car payments, food? And that's when it really hit me, and I realized I needed to get us life insurance right now. So I called AIG Direct, and in less than 5 minutes, I had a quote. I was shocked at how affordable it is. Just $18 a month for $250,000 of term life coverage. I feel so much better knowing the kids and I are protected. And my husband was so happy I got the quote.
Save up to 70% when you get term life insurance through AIG Direct. Call now for a free, no-obligation quote. It only takes 5 minutes, and you could save up to 70%. 1-800-322-1427. That's 1-800-322-1427. Call now. 1-800-322-1427.
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This is Larry Jacobs, the golfer's food and weight loss guy from ThinGolfer.com. 7 out of 10 of us golfers are overweight and out of shape. So here's a quick tip. Overweight or not, the foods you eat have a lasting impact on just about every aspect of your health. We now know that many of the chronic diseases so common today are largely preventable and in some cases fully reversible simply by eating certain foods and avoiding others. Remember, it's not how much you eat, it's what you eat that matters most. So if you want to get out of the fat trap, go to ThinGolfer.com and get my free weight loss podcast. My program turns you from a fat storer into a fat burner in 2 weeks or less without dieting, counting calories, or starving. It's amazing what you can do with just a knife, a fork, a pair of sneakers, a good blueprint, and the right mindset. You ate your way into this mess, you can eat your way out. Change your food, change your life.
Get started by listening to Larry's free weight loss podcast at ThinGolfer.com.
Author, journalist, and American patriot. This is Chuck Morse Speaks.
Thank you very much. And Mark Hayden is my guest. We're talking death penalty. Mark is with the group Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. We have a caller, I believe. Oh, he just dropped off. You're welcome to join us. 1-800-773-8255 is the number. We're talking about the efficacy of the death penalty. Mark, I gather your group really wants to abolish the death penalty federally and state. Is that right?
I would. I'm a kind of a small government guy, so I'd like to see it done on a state-by-state legislative basis on up. That's how I would prefer to see it done.
Well, there is a federal death penalty.
Right. No, there.
I know
there
that Timothy McVeigh was executed as under federal law. I think that this guy in Boston, who bombed the Boston Marathon, is being charged in federal court, and that would be a federal death penalty. That would be the judgment of the Attorney General whether or not to recommend it. In fact, I think that's what they're waiting for if and after he's convicted. And that's very, very serious. That gets into the area of treason, acts of war against the United States, engaging in and abetting an enemy at a time of war. And, I support that, but again, very, very carefully defined. And on the state level, again, I support it, but I think that it has to be, the laws have to be rewritten in a way that someone who is accused of a capital crime can't bargain it away, and yet someone who is not guilty of a crime has to be protected. And it seems to me that it shouldn't be that difficult with, technologies that we have today and with a very high standard of proof that's put in place, very careful guidelines. I would imagine that could be done and done effectively.
I can empathize exactly where you're coming from, but unfortunately we don't live in a perfect world, and we've tried to implement these fixes legislatively, and it just hasn't worked. And what we've seen is the judicial system is riddled with failures, and the same thing with our government as a whole. I mean, you look at the federal government, they can't even run healthcare.gov. Why should they be able to run a death penalty system? And the IRS has been targeting Tea Party. So why would we think the death penalty would be any more fair or less fair than that? This is a major problem. We also live in a time of ballooning deaths and annual deficits, and the death penalty adds to that. So there's no shortage of problems here, and we've tried to fix it time and time again, but we just haven't been able to reach that point where we can say, without a doubt, no innocent people will be hurt with the implementation of this process.
No, I respect that opinion. I do think that it is a function of government to conduct a proper death penalty policy, one that is conducive to virtually free of fraud. Maybe it is true that it's not ever impossible, but I think that again there are clear cases where someone has committed a capital crime, and I want us to make sure that it's carried out in those cases swiftly and efficiently. It doesn't take years. And that it can be done in a way that's, humane and that brings about proper justice. And that's what our system of justice is supposed to do. The ultimate,
The high standard that you speak of is actually part of what's created these delays, because they have this decades-long appeals process, which adds to the court costs, obviously, makes it exorbitantly expensive, but also delays the inevitable for a very long time. So this high standard kind of contradicts that as well.
Well, then again, I mean, that's a matter of fixing the judicial process by which it's processed quickly and properly. It shouldn't be the case that someone is there for decades. That's not even humane. If someone is on death row, to keep them alive all those years, there should be a way where it can be gotten over with. I mean, it's not something that anybody, I don't think, celebrates, but it's part of justice. It's the ultimate. It needs to be preserved as the ultimate. I think that a public entity, a government, needs to be able to reserve the right, ultimately, to carry out the ultimate form of justice in the very specific cases. It's part of the basic function of a sovereign government.
The long, drawn-out process that you talked about, I've talked to many people who say they would love to see it shortened, but the long process has actually saved the lives of some of my friends. Anthony Graves, he was in prison for 18 years, on death row for 12 years for a crime he didn't commit. And if it wasn't for that drawn-out appeals process, he would have already been executed. And you see someone recently in Texas was released after spending 25 years in jail because the DA had actually held on to evidence and refused to release it, which would have exonerated.
All right, Mark, we're going to take a break for news. Can you stick with me after the news?
Sure.
We'll be back.
IRN USA Radio News, I'm Jason Word. Secretary of State John Kerry told lawmakers any new sanctions against Iran would risk ruining the talks aimed at stopping Tehran's nuclear program. Kerry told a Senate Banking Committee that the U.S. would likely lose negotiating partners if new economic penalties were imposed on Iran. Kerry told the BBC Iran and world leaders came extremely close to making a deal over the weekend. Both Republicans and Democrats have argued a new round of sanctions could be a bargaining chip for Kerry in the talks with Iran. Officials with the Department of Homeland Security say hackers have made at least a dozen failed attempts to take over the healthcare.gov website. An official testifying at a meeting of the House Homeland Security Committee said attempted attacks were made between November 6th and November 8th. The FBI is also investigating a report that a denial-of-service attack program called Destroy Obamacare is being freely shared on various file-sharing websites, but say they have not seen a DDoS attack against healthcare.gov. IRN USA Radio.
I love you, son. So it hurts when you say I hate you. I'm your mother. I'm tired of you disrespecting me when you don't get your way. I work hard to make sure you have everything you need. I should be able to ask you to get out of bed in the morning without a fight. So from now on, things are going to be different. I ordered the Total Transformation Program. We're not going to scream and fight anymore. I'm going to tell you what to do in a different way, and you're going to do it. You're not going to call me ugly names anymore, and if you do, you're going to get consequences that'll keep you from calling me ugly names. We're not going to do things your way anymore, son. We're going to do things the Total Transformation way.
Get the Total Transformation free. Just order the program, tell us how it works for you, and you can keep it for free. Call 1-800-489-9301. That's 1-800-489-9301. Call now. 1-800-489-9301. That's 1-800-489-9301.
Pressure, cholesterol, or other cardiovascular issues? Are you taking an omega-3 supplement but are not seeing the results you've been promised? Dr. Steven Sinatra's famous Little Red Pill is the only fish oil alternative enhanced with resveratrol, providing you with sustained energy and the amazing health results you've been looking for. Now you can balance triglycerides and cholesterol, improve circulation, get rid of blood pressure problems, and many other signs of aging with Omega Q Plus with resveratrol. Call today to find out how to get a free bonus bottle of Omega Q Plus with resveratrol as part of our radio special. Dr. Steven Sinatra is America's #1 integrative cardiologist and formulated this alternative to fish oil with high levels of omega-3, DHA, and EPA from a triple purified calamine source with CoQ10, resveratrol, and 4 other ingredients for complete cardiovascular protection. This combination nearly doubles the power of fish oil for your heart and brain. Call now to get your free bonus bottle at 1-800-589-3224 and ask for Omega Q Plus with resveratrol. That's 1-800-589-3224. Again, 1-800-589-3224. 1-800-589-3224.
Granite Law is a law firm with partners in each state we do business. Our initial consultation is free, but there will be a cost to retain the firm.
Attention homeowners. The Obama administration is pressuring lenders to do more to prevent foreclosure with its Home Affordability and Stability Plan. If you own a home and you're having trouble making your payments or facing foreclosure, you need to call Granite Law's Mortgage Helpline today at 800-538-6780. A loan modification program can stop foreclosure proceedings, forgive late payments and penalties, take your adjustable rate mortgage to a fixed rate, and even reduce your mortgage payment to as low as 2%.
I seriously started to believe that we might end up on the street with our 2 kids. So we called Granite Law and they helped us get our past due payments forgiven. And we got a lower interest rate. And now we have a payment we can afford.
If you're having trouble making your mortgage payment, you need to call 800-538-6780 today. Again, that's 800-538-6780. You don't need equity or good credit. You just need to call 800-538-6780.
Chuck Morse speaks.
Thank you very much. And Mark Hayden is my guest. Conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Mark, could you talk a little bit about, and I ask this question of all guests who come in this program, so don't feel put in the spot, but who is behind conservatives concerned about the death penalty? Who is financing it?
Well, conservatives concerned about the death penalty is actually a project of a broader criminal justice reform, nonpartisan nonprofit called Equal Justice USA, and we're funded by just a variety of grants and individual funders. It's not exactly my expertise since I'm not in finance. I'm just the external affairs guy. But one of my favorite stories is one of our donors is an elderly woman who actually lives in poverty, and she had the death penalty touch her life in a very unfortunate way. And she sends us a letter every so often with $1 in it saying, that's all I can afford, but I just love you guys. And stories like that really move me.
Okay, and you were talking a bit about several cases that you know of where someone was on death row. Could you elaborate?
Sure. Well, there are over 143 people have been on death row and wrongfully convicted and released for various reasons, whether it's prosecutors withholding evidence, which we've seen happens with far too much frequency. DNA evidence sometimes exonerates them, but like I said, DNA evidence is only there in 5 to 10% of cases, so you can't rely on that. Others are the unreliability of eyewitness testimony. We've seen that that's a problem time and time again. And what we find is the appeals process is there just to make sure they had a fair trial, not to enter new evidence. So it's very hard to reintroduce new evidence that may exonerate someone who's wrongfully convicted. So they have to fight tooth and nail with the prosecutor, with the appellate judges, to enter this evidence to try to clear their name. And oftentimes, new evidence is not allowed in. And we've seen people that may have been innocent that were put to death.
And you know of specific cases of people who had been accused and they were innocent.
Well, yeah, over 143 people have been accused and been wrongfully convicted. If you want to talk about who have been executed, I think Carlos de Luna is a very good one to point to. He was executed based on eyewitness testimony, who later said, "I'm 50% sure he's the right guy," which is obviously not the burden.
Well, that shouldn't be that shouldn't be enough proof. I mean, if we had high standards of proof, then he would have been protected. I mean, that's you have to be 100% sure it's the right guy.
Sure. And Cameron Todd Willingham was put to death based on forensic science. It said he created a fire that burned his house down and killed his children. But it turned out after he was executed, other experts came up and said that was actually not arson. That was just a tragic accident. So we see time and time again that this forensic evidence that people use oftentimes is very subjective and is not scientific in the end.
Well, I mean, just again, the issue I see there is that there has to be a higher standard of proof. There really, the cases that you mentioned, I would argue don't measure up to that standard. It's not, you know what I mean? It's like that's not good enough to say that's kind of it's hearsay. It's circumstantial.
Sure, and I would agree that the standard was obviously not high enough because we've seen too many people put to death where there were legitimate questions regarding their verdict. But I just don't believe that we can reach that limit to where we can say without a shadow of a doubt that no innocent people or no people that shouldn't be on death row are there or will be executed. I just don't think the government is infallible to the point where they could say that.
Well, they can't say it right now because of the cases that we discussed, but I think that the problem can be addressed legislatively in terms of just raising those standards to the point where there really can be, it can be very high. I mean, I look to, for example, historically the tradition of the Jewish courts in Europe. They had a death penalty, but their standards were so high that oftentimes someone convicted of a crime who is a Christian would want to appear before them. Anyway, we'll take a quick break here. We'll be right back.
Could saving 15 to 20% of your wealth in gold and silver coins protect your assets from inflation? Does a grizzly defecate amongst the tall foliage? Do pirates like to say, "Arrgh"? Do politicians in diapers need to be changed frequently, and for the same reason? Well, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, you certainly understand the need then to own gold and silver coins. Come to usgoldcoins.com or call us at 1-800-878-2646 and protect your wealth by acquiring gold and silver United States coins. usgoldcoins.com, 1-800-878-2646. As you are enjoying this program, please consider the following. If the value of your money is based solely on the number of paper dollars in circulation, what does a massive increase in the supply of money mean to you? How does quantitative easing affect the value of your wealth? Will printing by central banks around the world change the nature of the buying power of your money? If this is all the case, what is an investor to do? usgoldcoins.com highly recommends that people diversify their wealth. Call us today and learn how you can acquire physical gold and silver coins to help divide your assets into a number of areas that will provide greater protection against an inevitable loss in buying power by the excessive printing of capital. If we can't control Washington, if we can't control the central banks, it is up to the individual investors to protect their own wealth. Do you have a sufficient amount of gold and silver coins? Please call us today, 1-800-878-2646, or log on the web at usgoldcoins.com.
Program.
These symptoms familiar? Hot flashes, sleeplessness, irritability. How about low libido or weight gain? If you're a woman over 40 experiencing any of these symptoms, you probably have hormonal imbalance. And until you balance your hormones, it can be practically impossible to get relief from these problems. But you're in luck, because Amberen can help you balance hormones and relieve your hot flashes, sleeplessness, irritability, and other symptoms of menopause. And now you can finally lose weight. Yes, even that stubborn body fat with Amberen Weight Loss, a powerful new product that will help you get the results you want. So you can finally lose the weight and all those other awful menopause symptoms. Call now and ask how you can get your free sample of Amberen Weight Loss. Just call 1-800-261-7405. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. Call Amberen right now. 1-800-261-7405. That's 1-800-261-7405. 1-800-261-7405.
Chuck Morse speaks.
Thank you very much. And Mark Hayden is my guest. Conservatives concerned about the death penalty. If you'd love to join the program, 1-800-773-8255. 1-800-773-8255. And look, I mean, I think that we agree, Mark, that there are people who have been falsely accused of the capital crime, which is murder. And they've even been executed, but they're also on death row, and that's unjust. At the same time, I do believe there are standards that could be put in place that where very carefully identified cases, cut and dried cases, judged by juries, could be where the death penalty could be carried out. My concern is just that whether or not that can happen, not whether or not the death penalty should be carried out, which I think it should be.
Well, we have tried many times to fix it and raise the standards, but in the end, we see that the program still is not functioning properly, and I just don't have that kind of faith in government. And it is the government that decides, first off, whether or not they should seek the death penalty. It's practically left up to the prosecutor. There's a lot of discretion that they have. And then the government has put in a framework in place that favors the death penalty and does not favor the defendant. The appeals process obviously is a very big example of that. And then you can't even serve on a capital jury unless you say that you support the death penalty. And I don't find that to be a jury of your peers. This is a process that's been carefully implemented by the government that just doesn't seem like it works. We know it doesn't work, and it obviously favors the government. And I just don't have the faith in the government to see them implement fixes to give them perfection. I just don't think perfection is attainable in this world.
Well, no, of course not. But at the same time, I mean, you bring up an interesting point where a juror is asked whether or not they support the death penalty. The death penalty is in the Constitution. And it's certainly something that is in state constitutions. So, I mean, I suppose it's, it probably ultimately is an appropriate question because they're being asked whether they support the Constitution. Now, once they're on the jury, they can then decide whether or not they think a capital crime was committed. That's really where the jury could focus on a case that the panel can focus on. Anyway, we'll be right back.
USA Sports, I'm Jet Williams. You won it, this one's got it. Well, that at least sounded good. Lots of NBA action on Wednesday night. The Clippers, also known as Lob City, beat the Oklahoma City Thunder or rolled them 111-103. Other games of great social ramification. The Magic make the Bucks disappear 94-91. The 76ers 86 to defuse the Rockets 123-117 in overtime. Bobcats beat Boston 89-83. Raptors trap the Grizz 103-87. Minnesota gives Cleveland some cavalier attitude 124-95. The Knicks knack Patty Whack Hawklanta 95-91. Spurs beat the Wizards 92-79. The Nuggets beat the Kobe-less Lakers 111-99. our hero still recovering from Achilles tendon surgery. This is IRN USA Sports.
Today in America, people wake up worrying about their job and paying their bills, and that stinks. People in third world countries wake up worrying if their children will have anything to eat, and that stinks even worse. There's a way to help solve both of those problems. Get on the internet and go to usagoodness.com and find out how you can be a social entrepreneur. Hi, how in the world are you anyway? I'm Andy Willoughby, and for years I have been helping people work from home. With usagoodness.com, you can earn extra money working from home by helping to feed starving children in poverty-stricken areas. How great is that? The only tools you'll need are a telephone, internet access, and a good work ethic. We'll teach you how to be a social entrepreneur and earn extra money while helping others. Go to usagoodness.com or call 800-301-6177. 800-301-6177.
To round out the board, the Jazz make the Pelicans, that's right, the Pelicans, sing the blues, 111-105. Blazers eclipse the Suns, 92-89. Sacramento tears down the Brooklyn Nets, 107-86, to round out a busy night on the NBA hardwood. Dominating the voting like they dominated batters all season, Tigers pitcher Max Scherzer and Dodgers ace Clayton Kershaw easily won the American League and National League Cy Young Awards, respectively. Scherzer took 28 of 30 first-place votes. Kershaw unanimously was selected in the National League, becoming the second Dodger pitcher in 3 years to win the Cy. Jet Williams, IRN USA Sports.
Based solely on the number of paper dollars in circulation, what does a massive increase in the supply of money mean to you? Will printing by central banks around the world change the nature of the buying power of your money? If this is all the case, what is an investor to do? USGoldCoins.com highly recommends that people diversify their wealth. Call us today and learn how you can acquire physical gold and silver coins to help divide your assets into a number of areas that will provide greater protection against an inevitable loss in buying power by the excessive printing of capital. If we can't control Washington, if we can't control the central banks, it is up to the individual investors to protect their own wealth. Do you have a sufficient amount of gold and silver coins? Please call us today, 1-800-878-2646, or log on the web at usgoldcoins.com.
Taking back America one listener at a time. Chuck Morse speaks.
Okay, we're back. Mark Hayden's my guest. Conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Mark, let people know how they can get involved in your group, how they can get out more information about you and your group.
Absolutely. If they want more information, they can go to conservativesconcern.org. We have fact sheets, a lot of information. We have quotes from our biggest supporters, Brent Bozell, Jay Sekulow, Ron Paul, and Richard Viguerie. And if they want to contact me directly, I invite them to. It's info@conservativesconcern.org, and I would be happy to hear from them.
Well, you certainly have a very impressive lineup of conservatives with you. I mean, these are people that I admire immensely. I've interviewed over the years. This is an important decision where I think reasonable people can differ. I think that, again, I mean, the whole idea that the government can't do this because it can't be trusted, that seems a little anti-government to me. But, we're not anarchists here. The government does have a very specific function. The question is whether or not they're conducting themselves both in the Constitution and in a practical sense in the interests of the American people. And I just urge I believe the way forward is to develop a system that really does ensure to the maximum degree that the death penalty will be carried out, because I think that's what people demand. Nobody wants to see an innocent person put to death. the same time, no one wants to see a guilty person walking around, which is in many cases what we have now, at least here in Massachusetts.
Sure, and I agree. This is a dialogue that we should be opening. And I agree with you. It is in theory permissible, but the way we run it here just doesn't work. And I'm a limited government guy. I'm not an anarchist, as we briefly mentioned. But the government runs its programs with terrible efficiency and efficacy, and we don't have to look too far to see that. Just look at the DMV, the Postal Office, or the Department of Transportation. And the death penalty is just that. It's a bureaucratic mess that is not held to the right standards, and that should concern all of us.
Right, and it does, but the answer is not necessarily to get rid of government. Get rid of the post office. Yeah.
No, I'm not advocating for getting rid of government. Absolutely not. But the government makes a bureaucratic mess of many things, and we can look at Obamacare, for instance. And I think that's another great example of the government. When it comes to things like life, they're far too precious for the government to get involved in ways where it could take innocent life.
Right, and again, I mean, we're talking here about a basic function of government, which is constitutional and function in the same sense that we also expect our government to provide for the common defense and engage in other constitutional activities. And as a conservative, I don't want to see government exceed its constitutional prerogatives, but at the same time, I want to make sure the government fulfills other constitutional prerogatives that it's abrogated.
Sure, but the death penalty doesn't necessarily. Many studies have come out showing that there is no deterrent effect from the death penalty, so that doesn't really provide for the defense of we the people. And you mentioned the Constitution. I don't believe the death penalty is unconstitutional. I know others may disagree with me on that, but there is no mandate that we have to use the death penalty. And if we don't have to, and we can't be positively sure beyond a shadow of a doubt, then I believe that we should take a step back.
Well, the Constitution does permit the death penalty, and it does mention it by name in terms of federal crimes, and the states often will therefore craft their own death penalty legislation. To my way of thinking, that's entirely a basic function of government, just like setting tariff and trade policy, or determining the value of our currency. These are all basic constitutional functions, Article 1, Section 8 functions of the Congress in particular. And I would think that a good conservative wants to see the government fulfill these functions, nothing more but also nothing less.
Sure, and I'm not disagreeing that it's permissible per se through the Constitution. It's not unconstitutional in my opinion, but just because it's permissible, it doesn't mean it's a mandate, and we aren't required to carry that out.
No, we're not required to carry it out, but we're required to have it in existence as part of our basic law and then decide how we're going to carry it out. And I think those standards should be very high. Very rarely should we employ it. But there are situations where I think it's appropriate, not only constitutionally, but also I do believe it's a deterrent. And I think it's also does come down to being a basic ethical issue and a basic sovereign issue, that a sovereign people have the option of insisting on the ultimate punishment for crimes that violate the whole fabric of a nation. Anyway, we'll be right back to the
program.
You probably knew that Thomas Edison gave us the first commercial light bulb. But did you know he invented alkaline batteries and an electric train? Edison said, if we all did the things we're capable of, we would astound ourselves. Hi, how in the world are you anyway? I'm Andy Willoughby. For almost 2 decades, I've been helping families build home businesses. Many have been astounded at what they've been able to achieve. Today, I want to introduce you to my newest and most exciting home business concept ever. It's MaxAchieve.com. If you'd like to earn $500 to $5,000 or more a month working from home, check out MaxAchieve.com. This is more than a home business. At MaxAchieve, we want to help you experience more success in all areas of your life. To find out how you could astound yourself, go to maxachieve.com. That's maxachieve.com. Or call 800-801-3465. 800-801-3465.
Chuck Morse speaks.
Thanks so much, and again, I want to thank you for joining me, Mark Hayden. Please let my listeners know about you and about your group once again.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much, Mark. And thank you. And we shall return tomorrow at the usual time, but before we sign off, I might as well mention my books which are available on Amazon Kindle. They are as follows: The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism, Adolf Hitler and Hajj Amin al-Husseini; Barney Frank and the Law of Unintended Consequences, How the Frank Amendment Helped Terrorists Get Legal Visas; The Counterfabians, Republicans in the Age of Obama; On the Jewish Question, Karl Marx, Anti-Semitism and the War Against the West; Islamo-Communism, The Communist Connection to Islamic Terrorism; Acorn, The Takeover of America; The Art and Science of American Money, How Our Money is Created and Why It Matters; Bible Tabula Rasa, The Book of Genesis;